Hi everyone, I am Martina Cunha and you're listening to Backstage Talk. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Backstage Talk Season 4. Today I am honored and happy to have my friend Dr. Alisa Hurwitz here with me. I, as many of my friends, met her through Twitter because we started discussing musicals, mental health, a lot of this discourse and conversation around how art can impulse and enhance mental health, not only in performers, but also in the audience. But also, Dr. Alisa is a really big fighter for LGBTQIA plus rights, specifically trans rights. Um, and I had the pleasure of seeing her in two incredible panels on BroadwayCon 2022. So, Dr. Aliza, I am so happy to have you here. Welcome to Backstage Talk.
No, thank you so much for having me. I just love that you exist in my
And I
in the
love it.
world and in my sphere. And I can call you a friend. You 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 bring joy and love to the world, and I really appreciate that.
And you know, I love you back so much. So, let's start by getting to know you a little bit. Tell us, introduce yourself to us.
Yeah. So um, I am. I am a mom, daughter, sister, aunt, friend, um, cousin, um, and outside of my professional life, I am an advocate for rescue pit bulls, much maligned and misunderstood. Collection of breeds of dogs and mixes, and have a pity mix Louis. He's our second pit bull mix. Great family dogs. Um, and those are aspects of my and a theater lover. Those are aspects of my life that are uh, more important to me than my work life or my work identity, my career identity. Um, but I am, yeah, by trade, a psychologist, and I do work as a generalist, so depression, anxiety, mood disorder, other mood disorders, that kind of thing. But my specialty is providing gender affirming healthcare for the trans community, and I am passionate about that work and about the advocacy both within the workplace and outside of the workplace, because trans rights are human rights.
Yes.
And as a Jewish person, when I say never again, when we say never again, we mean never again to anybody. And there are attacks on the trans community and trans rights currently in our country, in the United States. And I just can't sit idly by and not do something about it.
Yeah.
But the way that we have connected is through my work in theater, which is really a passion project, because I love theater. I love theater. And my role was never to be on the stage, um, uh, but I felt called to it, and it really was just as somebody who loves the art form and an audience member. But I realized several years, maybe 5 years ago now, that I could bring my professional knowledge, to the theater world and talk about mental health in a way that brought people into the conversation, through performing arts, through theater. Because I think those conversations matter, and I think destigmatizing matter and normalizing conversations about mental health, and so that's how Dr. Drama was born.
I absolutely love it. And that is, as you just said, how we connected.
Yeah.
Um, because the conversation around mental health, specifically since 2018
Yeah.
to until today, has been more prominent. And I, as a performer and as an avid audience member, I do think that each time we talk about mental health in the stage, either a play, a musical, a movie, a series, when done right,
Hmm.
can do a lot of beneficial things for the audience and also the performers. And I remember when I started following you, that was the whole conversation that brought me to you, and I just loved it. But before we dive into that, I would love for you to tell us, what is a random fun fact about you?
um, I showed my hand a little early. I think a random fun fact about me is that I am, a mom by day and a psychologist and have a serious job and all that thing. And I am also a pit bull loving tattooed person. Um, and um, I was very straight laced growing up, and so I kind of like, not that having a pit bull is rebellious, but it's just people have certain associations with it, and with tattoos, and I kind of feel like a superhero because my tattoo they're for me, and so they're really meaningful for me, and I kind of feel like it's the cape under my suit,
Yes,
and and I yeah, so I'm a pit bull loving tattooed woman.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So now let's dive deep into this relationship that you've created between psychology and theater, because it's broad. It's not only Broadway or musical theater. Obviously, we connected because of musical theater, but
Yeah.
what was that aha moment that you said, I want to bridge
Hmm.
these two passions of
Yeah, it was really an epiphany, I am not I'm not trying to like minimize what I do or contribute or whatever, but I'm not a creative person. Like I'm not an actor. I am not a writer, a playwright. I am not a director. Um and so I can only imagine like like art creating art feels like this a lot. It just was an epiphany. It just came to me and I had nothing to do with it in a way. It like felt like it came outside of me. Um and part of it was because I was feeling a little stale in my work. I was in another job and I was feeling stale and unchallenged and kind of in mid-career mode where
mine.
the stuff I was doing wasn't going to change the work I was doing, and I didn't feel as inspired by kind of the learning curve because it just wasn't the same anymore. Um and it just came to me. It came to me, from like I said, from outside of me, and it really was like a lightning strike, and a moment of inspiration, and, because I'm doing this as an offering and because I'm passionate about it, it's really allowed it to be whatever it's meant to be, and so it's kind of evolved in different ways. At first it was a lot of, print, interviews with folks, um and and evolved into um to doing more stuff live like talkbacks, and consulting with theater productions on mental health elements. And then over the pandemic, another inspiration was doing an Instagram live series about musicals and mental health that lasted for just about a year. I only stopped doing it because I went back to the office and I kind of didn't have the bandwidth, time wise, but that's just what it needed to be and during that time. And um has gone into doing panels at Broadway Con and at other other live events and teaching, and who knows what it'll be in the future. But it's been, when I let it be what it was supposed to be, it kind of was a lot more, uh it felt right. It felt right, so it literally was like a strike of lightning. It was the inspiration.
I love it. I love it. So now let's double click on mental health
Yeah.
in musical theater or performing arts, or the whole performing arts industry. So how are you like linking both of them? How have you seen that shows specifically have done it right, have done it wrong?
Yeah.
How can we as audience members, but also as part of the creative teams, can support this endeavor of always trying to do it better with such a sensitive topic as mental health?
Yeah. Oh, it's a big question. And I think in a way, to kind of answer the first part, I think in a way that every musical is about mental health. I think that The same things that interest me about psychology are the same things that interest me about musicals, and plays too. Although musicals are just more my thing. Um, uh, that's 95% of the time what I'm going to see is a musical, and about 5% of the time plays. But it's about understanding human behavior and about expression of our internal lives, right? So in mental health, the expression of our internal lives is talking. And it can be art therapy, but it's really, I'm talking about talking, talk therapy. And in musical theater, it is through dialogue and dance and movement and song, um, and lighting, and costume. And to me, it's all the same. It's all, understanding human relationships, understanding human behavior, understanding expression of our internal lives. Um, so for me, the Showboat, arguably the first American musical, is a mental health musical, just as much as Next to Normal. Next to Normal is more content, kind of has more of the content, so to speak, mental health content, but they're both about understanding human behavior, and they're both about people's inner lives. Um, and I think that there are musicals like Next to Normal that are really content wise about mental health topics, um, uh, or other shows like Dear Evan Hansen. Um, there are some shows I'm aware of that are in development that are really. I hope they get to see a wider audience, because they really are very spot on about that topic as well. And I think when the content is clearly about mental health, it really engenders the conversation more organically. Um, but I think every Sondheim musical, gosh, you could dig in and never get to the bottom, right? And talking about psychology. Um, he was Sondheim was as much as he co-authored, right, these works with many other creators, but as much as he had a voice in certainly in the lyrics and the music, he was an astute observer of human behavior. um, and I forget what your there was like a third element to that question.
How can we support as creatives this approach to mental health
Mm.
topics in musical theater to do it right?
Ideally, ideally consulting with an expert, because while I will say over and over and over again that musicals are not meant to be documentaries. And so I think it's unreasonable to expect them to be as such, or, or flyers for psychology and mental health, so to speak. I do think that there are responsible and irresponsible things that shows can do with their content. So, for example, a show like Dear Evan Hansen, very thoughtfully, did not put there is a suicide in the show. Not a spoiler alert, because it happens pretty early on, and they don't put this any of that on stage, which is really important, because it does appeal to there's a lot of young people who watch that show, and suicidality can be contagious to already vulnerable adolescents. And that says to me they consulted with a psychologist, to be responsible with what they were presenting, so that they were not causing harm. Now, I know there are criticisms of that show about a specific way in which it caused harm, in making the protagonist somebody who some people experience as lying and manipulative. And I don't think that was the author's intention for that character to be considered that way. But I know some people read it that way, and so there's a conversation there about that. But I know that in terms of how they handled the suicide in the show, it was done thoughtfully, and obviously with consultation. Not with me, but like seeing that, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yep, they had input.
Yeah, they had an expert on their side. I think that this happened also with Next to Normal, which is, as you said earlier, a show that these topics about mental health are at the forefront, right? It's like this is the main topic of different um, situations around mental health with different characters. And
Yeah.
I think that Next to Normal did it beautifully, um, in a very raw way
Yeah.
that, for me personally, touched very deep fibers of my own story.
Mm.
And I know it's, for me, when I talk about mental health and musical theater, I instantaneously think about Next to Normal and how they did it wisely, safely, and in a very true way, not trying to go into the archetype or the stereotype of mental health issues on people, or the conversation around it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love that the way that we can help is always going back to an expert and
Yeah.
asking them and not being afraid of trying to push that conversation a little bit harder in the shows that we're working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, inviting ways for people to continue the conversation is really important and healthy. Um, so whether that's including resources that are relevant to the show at hand, um, to the content at hand, to hosting talkbacks, um, to having online content that kind of gets provides more information and gets people thinking, is always because people want to talk, especially, I've seen a shift in the public discourse about mental health since the pandemic, I think, especially. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We got to talk about it.
As equals as human rights, trans rights, LGBTQIA plus rights, and this conversation that has also been a huge discussing topic
Yeah.
on Broadway.
Yes. Yes, it has. The issue of representation and who's authoring that representation, right? Because it's not just about having Black bodies or trans bodies, or lesbian bodies, on the stage. Who is literally who's telling the story? Who writes the story? Um, and that matters as well. I think about, there's an actor in the revival of 1776, which is a show that has all the cast as marginalized genders, and one of the cast members, who is non-binary, Sav. I hope I'm saying their name right. It's Sav. They they advocated for, change where they were experiencing getting misgendered a lot, at the stage door and by theater patrons, and advocated for the roundabout to support, having the kind of the resources necessary to have an insert, and online resources about gender identity and pronouns. Now, I think it'd be great if, as trans allies, that we could be doing more of the work, because it shouldn't be on the so much on the shoulders of people who are trans and non-binary. Um, so I don't want to imply that trans and non-binary folks need to be doing it alone. We need to be doing it with them and alongside of them. But I just thought that was so cool, because people will learn and understand more because that information is there.
Yes, absolutely. So, Dr. Alisa, what piece of advice would you give someone that is either studying or working in psychology but wants to move into the entertainment industry?
um, I think I would give them the same advice that I would give somebody who is studying psychology and wants to move into working in psychology. Self-care, 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 self-care. And self-care includes healthy boundaries. And it's so hard when you're starting out in a career. And I think especially in the entertainment industry, because of the narratives that are told about it. The show must go on. You're lucky. You should be thanking your lucky stars you have this opportunity. There are, 10 people behind you who will gladly take your spot, or whatever, 100 people. Which all creates this unhealthy imbalance of power. which supports people or encourages people to tolerate abuses of power or tolerate um, boundary crossing or tolerate um, you know being overworked, and it you know that is so hard, I think, again, especially in the entertainment industry, where people are like, the narrative is, you are so lucky to be here, you're so lucky to have this opportunity. um and so self-care, it's knowing what you are willing to work with and what you're not, um trusting your gut, um refueling your tank, knowing what refuels your tank, and engaging in that. The basics, going back down to basics of hydration, rest. Um, know that if you are more refueled by spending time with other people or spending time with yourself, and making sure you have time for that, self care. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important in this industry to set those healthy boundaries.
Hmm.
It's mind blowing to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and
And you're
it's
not
very
always gonna
necessary.
be supported. The industry's not always gonna support that. I think
Yes.
about, Amber Gray, right? She was playing Persephone in Hadestown, the original Broadway cast of Hadestown, and she had a baby, and she asked, to do 6 shows a week instead of 8, um, to so that she could have 3 days off so she could spend time with her kids. I think she already had another kid, and then she had a baby during her run, and they supported it. Maybe not incidentally or coincidentally, I should say. It's more of a female-led creative team
Mhm.
in an industry that is, like a lot of industries, has been mostly male-led, so and white. So I think that really makes a difference, in them, supporting that request. But that was a boundary for her, and needing that time with her young family. And they, a show could say no, and if that's your boundary, then that's your boundary, and if that means you have to step away, um it's better for you to be well as a human than used up as a commodity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Alisa, last question. Which are your top five favorite musical theater shows?
But my top 5 musical theater shows, like, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I love this question. And of course, right, it kind of changed. There are some that are always in there, and then it changes, it changes like week to week.
Yeah.
As complicated as it is, Carousel is in my top. That score moves me in a way that no, that just it that score. Ugh, that score. Um, and the criticism is that, that it's making Billy Bigelow the protagonist, when he's an abuser. He's abusive. I don't think the show is saying that's okay in any sort of way. I think it's very clearly like, whoa, he has amends to make. And it's a tragedy because he hurts her. Oh, and then the criticism, right, is that she forgives him. But I don't think that the narrative of the show is forgiving him. I think it's saying, whoa, he has amends to make, and what a tragedy he did not make those amends and change while he was
Mhm.
here on Earth.
Yeah.
Um, and it's too late now. I think that's what the narrative. That's my anyway. That score, blah, that score. Um, I think a newer show, but certainly I think is a work of staggering genius, is Hamilton. Um, that I know it's kind of cool to like now be like, oh, I don't like Hamilton, but I'm uncool, and I just love him. I think it's incredible and layered and brilliant. um Chicago is up there for me. I think that the what was it, 96 revival, I might be getting the year wrong, that's still on Broadway, and saw it again recently and is just as brilliant. I love that it's pared down, because it's like everything that is every movement. that Fosse choreography, every bit of movement, every shoulder move, every wrist, you know, turn of the wrist, every thread in the costume is necessary, and there's nothing extraneous, and it is so insightful, and it's such a scathing criticism of celebrity culture. I just think it's so great. And then my rotating last two spots, oh my gosh, I mean, I would say currently, um, I don't know, so many. I mean, what comes to mind is In the Heights, uh, and Once on This Island. Oh, I forgot Ragtime. Sorry, In the Heights has to get booted. Ragtime. I don't think I'll ever see anything as perfect as the original Broadway cast of that show. Um, yeah, I'm getting lost in thinking about the opening number, and then Once on This Island. And that's, I love, uh, I love those composers. They get me every time. Tesori and why am I blanking on his name? Oh, forgive me, I'm totally blanking on his name.
No.
But I Once on This Island, I especially this recent revival, I found incredibly, incredibly moving, and perfection and visceral, and changed the DNA of my heart. And there's criticisms of that piece as well, that are legitimate criticisms. I also just have had an emotional experience with that show that I am really grateful for. So those, I would say, were my top five: Carousel, Hamilton, Chicago, Ragtime, and Once on This Island.
Love it. Love them. Love them. Dr. Alisa, thank you so much for joining us. This has been incredible. And yeah, from the bottom of my heart, I love you, and thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. I love you too, Martine.
Thanks everyone for listening to this new episode of Backstage Talk. Remember to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Backstage Talk Podcast.